It happened over 20 years ago. At that time, I had a strong passion for rally driving, a type of motorsport where multiple cars travel together in a convoy toward a designated finish line. It wasn't an actual race. It was more like a group of amateurs coming together just to enjoy driving through the beautiful Southeast Asian scenery. Along the way, participants could stop at various points to engage in different activities. Most participants would bring friends or even their entire families, making it a fun group event. I brought my girlfriend along as she also enjoyed driving. Back in those days, there were no mobile phones like we have today, so communication within the convoy was done using radios, commonly known as walkie-talkies. On this particular rally, the trip was quite long, covering a significant distance with a total of 15 cars in the convoy. I was driving the 9th car in the lineup. Before the rally began, all the participants gathered for a briefing. During this gathering, I noticed that the driver of the 10th car was a man who had come alone, which was unusual. In our rally culture, it was common to have a partner or a group with you, so seeing someone alone was quite strange. Being friendly, I decided to strike up a conversation with him and asked why he had come alone. During our chat, I learned that he had quarreled with his girlfriend, which was why he was participating by himself. I also noticed that he seemed deeply troubled and sad, so I didn't press further, out of respect for his privacy. Soon, the rally began. The journey went without incident initially, with the cars traveling smoothly in a row. The distance was long, and we had planned several stops along the way. The entire trip was scheduled to last 4 days and 3 nights. On the first evening, as the convoy was heading towards the motel where we would spend the night, my girlfriend, who was in the passenger seat, glanced back at the 10th car to make sure it was still following us. To her surprise, she saw someone sitting in the passenger seat next to the driver. This puzzled her because, as far as she knew, the man was traveling alone. She mentioned it to me, pointing out that someone appeared to be sitting in the car with him. But I dismissed it, thinking it was just a trick of the light, a reflection, or something else that made it seem like there was someone there. I told her not to worry. There was probably nothing to it. Once the convoy arrived at the motel, everyone parked their cars. As they were getting ready to check in, the driver of the 11th car approached me, looking somewhat concerned. The driver asked if the man in the 10th car had really come alone. Without much thought, I confirmed yes, explaining that the man had mentioned he was alone because he had a fight with his girlfriend the day before. However, the driver of the 11th car insisted that while driving behind the 10th car, he had clearly seen someone sitting in the back seat, directly behind the driver. The person appeared to be holding something that looked like a knife and was repeatedly making stabbing motions toward the driver. At the time, it sounded so absurd to me that I just laughed it off and said it was probably just a trick of the light. My girlfriend, however, who had seen something similar earlier, started to feel uneasy, but I continued to dismiss it as nothing serious. The night passed without further incident, and the next morning, everyone gathered for breakfast in the motel's dining room. I noticed that the man from the 10th car looked particularly worn out. His face was pale, and he appeared to be sick. Concerned, I approached him and asked if he was all right. The man explained that he hadn't slept at all during the night and was feeling extremely tired, possibly even coming down with a fever. Out of goodwill, I offered to drive the man's car for him and let him rest in our car, which my girlfriend would drive. Grateful for the offer, the man agreed and handed over his car keys to me. When I walked over to his car and opened the door, I was immediately hit by a strong, nauseating odor, like something had died and was rotting inside the vehicle. The stench was so overwhelming that it made me gag. Not wanting to cause a scene, I quickly rolled down all the windows to let the air out as I drove. As I continued driving, the foul smell gradually began to dissipate, but then something unexpected happened. While driving with the windows down, I thought I heard a faint voice carried by the wind. The voice was soft but clear, sounding like a woman pleading for help.
Help me.
I brushed it off, thinking it was just the wind playing tricks on me. By lunchtime, the convoy stopped to eat. My girlfriend approached me with a concerned look on her face. She mentioned that while the man from the 10th car was resting in our vehicle, she had noticed him behaving strangely. His face looked unnerving, almost deranged, and she felt increasingly uncomfortable around him. She asked me if we could switch back the cars, and I readily agreed, having also been troubled by the unbearable smell in the man's car. I told her that I had already planned to switch back the cars because the smell was making it difficult for me to drive without feeling nauseous. After we finished our lunch, I went back to the man and asked if he felt better. He said he was starting to feel better, so I asked him if we could switch cars again, and he agreed. I handed the keys back, and we resumed the rally. As the day wore on and we continued driving, my girlfriend and I chatted casually, trying to shake off the unsettling feelings from earlier. At one point, as we were talking about the events of the day, my girlfriend suddenly gasped in horror. When I asked what was wrong, she said she had looked back at the 11th car again and saw something terrifying. There appeared to be someone inside the car, pressing her face against the windshield. The figure seemed to be staring out with an eerie intensity. Shaken, she told me what she saw, but I tried to calm her down, telling her not to look back and to ignore whatever it was. I reassured her that it was probably just another trick of the light or her imagination playing tricks on her. When the convoy reached the motel that evening, everyone parked their cars and began checking in. As we were getting settled, the driver of the 11th car once again approached my girlfriend and me, looking visibly scared. He then told us that he believed he had seen a ghost.
You guys probably won't believe me, but I think I just saw a ghost.
The driver recounted that while following the 10th car, he saw something unsettling. The trunk of the 10th car had slightly popped open while he was driving, and to his horror, a hand reached out from the gap, hanging loose and swinging left and right as the vehicle moved, before disappearing back inside moments later. Terrified, the driver begged me to switch positions with him for the rest of the rally, as he was too frightened to drive behind the 10th car. My girlfriend, already uneasy from her own experiences, tried to persuade me not to switch, fearing that something terrible might happen. However, as someone who still didn't believe in ghosts or the supernatural, I agreed to switch positions, thinking it was just a coincidence and that there was nothing to worry about. Later that night, just before going to bed, I remembered that I had forgotten something in our car. As I made my way down to the parking lot to retrieve it, I happened to walk past the 10th car. As I did, I heard a strange noise coming from the trunk, a faint clattering sound like something was moving inside. Curious, I stopped and tried to listen where the noise was coming from. But as soon as I stopped to listen, the noise also stopped. Thinking it was nothing, I shrugged it off and went back to our room. The next day, the rally continued as usual. This time, I was in 11th position. The day passed without incident, and as evening approached, we were nearing the finish line. It was getting dark, and visibility was low. As I drove, I noticed something in the 10th car ahead. To my horror, I saw a figure in the back seat, just as the 11th car's driver had described earlier. The figure appeared to be furiously stabbing at the driver with what looked like a knife. Terrified, I immediately began flashing the high beam lights to warn the driver. But instead of slowing down or stopping, the 10th car suddenly accelerated, veering off the road and crashing into a tree with a loud thud. Everyone in the convoy immediately stopped their cars and rushed to help. The driver of the 10th car was found unconscious, but alive. We quickly called for emergency, and as we waited for help to arrive, some of the men in the convoy began checking the car for any other passengers. That's when they noticed the trunk, which had popped open during the crash. As the trunk lid slowly lifted, a horrible, sickening smell filled the air. Inside the trunk, wrapped in a quilt, was the decaying body of a woman. She was bloated and had clearly been dead for some time. The sight and smell were so ghastly that several people recoiled in shock and horror. When the driver of the 10th car finally regained consciousness in the hospital, he confessed to killing of his girlfriend in a fit of rage the day before the rally. In his panic, he didn't know what to do with the body, so he decided to bring it with him to the rally, planning to dispose of it at some point along the way by throwing it off a cliff or into a remote area. However, because the rally was a group event and everyone is looking out for each other, he never found the opportunity to do so. The ghostly figure that everyone saw, including me, was it the ghost of 10th driver's deceased girlfriend trying to reach out for help?